Hi! This is the second part of an ongoing series, and I highly recommend watching the first part, as it's going to provide context around this ongoing story. Okay, this is an ideal point to talk about twin flame signs. There are, of course, many different ideas out there about the signs to look for. However, I'm going to break down the ones which, in my experience, are either the most central to a twin flame connection, or we can likely trust the most. In George's case, he'd had many prophecies over the years, some of which he felt would indicate the arrival of his twin flame. Not everyone will experience prophecies before encountering their twin. However, if they do, they likely happened for a reason that's specific to that twin flame pair. For George, it was logically to guide him through the period when he came across her, to give him faith in what was playing out and the confidence to take certain actions at that particular time. Prophecies may also occur if there is due to be an outside interference in a situation, so a higher power decides to step in to help counteract those forces. So prophecies won't always occur, as they can be an infringement upon the free will of the person on their own learning journey. Such infringement could also add to the karma of the higher forces, who with the best of intentions are intending to help that person. However, in certain situations, divine intervention is reasonable to occur. We can obviously gain faith through direct experiences of prophecies coming true. So, if we have had previous experience of this and trust in our guides, then twin flame prophecies can be one of the most reliable indicators. Of course, if one of those prophecies align with a prophecy that our twin had before meeting us, then that can be even more of a profound indicator. So, we ended the last episode at the end of 2021 when George signed up to a twin flame coaching course. This was focused on mindfulness, and being that he was so determined to progress on his journey, he began a 2-month solo retreat on one of the Scottish islands.
In January 2022, I began to have online meetings with one of the twin flame coaches. We immediately resonated with one another, and what was scheduled as a 1-hour session ran to well over 2. Bear in mind, at this point, I'd already encountered 2 people that I thought could potentially be my twin. When my story climaxed in 2021, with the second one, I noticed a pattern emerging. The climactic point with both women had taken place in alignment with 2 royal princes departing from their roles, and these were both princes of the organisation known as the Crown. The same organisation I was working for when my 888 prophecies took place. The first situation aligned with Prince Harry's departure to the United States in 2020. The second with Prince Philip's death in 2021. This realisation was emphasised because the night before Philip's death, I had precognition that a senior royal was about to die. 2 days after my one-on-one with this coach, news broke that Prince Andrew's royal title had been removed from him. To add to it, the name Andrew is the masculine version of the name of this coach, Andrea. I then realised that this cycle of 3 princes was a timeline. It was prophesied by my crown cup smashing into 3 pieces as a cat ran at me on 888. I also discovered that I was not the only one who'd encountered 2 people that could potentially be their twin. Andrea had 2. In July 2019, Andrea had called out to God, asking for a clear sign that would answer this question beyond any doubt. This prayer was followed by an experience where a raven flew down and landed at her feet. It then ended up staying for around 4 hours. This was undoubtedly a profound experience, but it still didn't answer the question. Strangely enough, I had also called out to God for direction the same month, and just like Andrea, ended up in a well-being oriented role early the following year.
Some of you will have listened to the interview I did back in February with Serena from the Lacello Lightworker podcast. If you haven't yet, I do recommend it, and a link will be in the description box. I'm very pleased to say that she's joining us now as a guest on this episode. And so, without further ado, I'm now going to hand straight over to Serena.
Thank you so much, Nina. George talked in the previous episode about his prophecy from a work colleague. As he later discovered, this colleague was the goddaughter of one of the British royal family. So, further emphasizing the crown symbolism of his Lionsgate prophecies. This colleague said to him that in the future he will cross paths with another part of his soul. George naturally responded by asking her, "When will this happen?" Although the answer given was unclear, she did express to him a riddle, which is, "You will move forward and back, and the hands will disappear from the clock altogether."
The reason for that incident was apparently to inspire me to move on from what I think was an alien love-bite connection. In early 2007, just after that relationship ended, I enacted a ritual on a mountaintop and called out for my divine partner. This experience climaxed with a raven flying down to the exact spot where I'd held the ritual. These alignments were intriguing enough, but events were about to take a more profound turn.
Another sign could be 5D light body experiences, which we discussed in the last episode. Our perception of such experiences upon waking will usually be that it was so much more than the average dream experience, far more real and memorable. It is important, however, that we honestly consider the overall energy of such a dream, as it is possible for encounters with more negative beings to be confused as well. And the ultimate sign in my experience is the shared alchemical marriage. I've previously spoken about this in detail about that process. If you'd like to hear more, I did do a video in 2024 called 3 Key Merges Alchemical Union, which you can find on my channel. However, it's worth pointing out that the alchemical marriage may not just play out in the form of the energetic and physical sensations, but astrologically too. This is going to be a major topic of discussion in future episodes of this series. That brings me to a final point, which is about alignment on both sides. Our twin may not initially experience or perceive such alignments, but at some point in any true twin flame experience, we would expect to see that happening at some point, that they are starting to notice and question such alignments as well. Ultimately, all the other twin flame signs can potentially fall within the realms of alignment on both sides. Whether it's shared prophecies, astral experiences, alchemical marriage-related experiences, or shared astrological harmony.
Soon after my coaching session with Andrea, I had another astral dream experience. The surroundings in it were a void of deep, inky blackness, just like the one I had with a snake, which initiated my base chakra. However, on this occasion, a lion appeared. It then lunged towards me, opening its jaws towards the top of my head. In effect, activating the crown chakra and completing my Kundalini awakening. On 888, it was a cat which ran at me when my crown cup smashed into 3 pieces. So it makes sense that the Lion King had arisen shortly after the conclusion of my 3 princes cycle. For 14 years, I'd been prophesizing to people that a significant woman would appear in my life
when the cat comes in.
My psychic work colleague also told me in 2020 that my twin would appear when the negative situation in the wider world is finally calming down. That fitted the timing. I was also told she would be in a relationship. This appeared to be the case too. By now, I was seriously considering that Andrea could be my twin. She was actually fulfilling the prophecies. It may seem strange, but this turn of events was not a great surprise to me. Partly because my prophecies had been so profound. Also, I was on retreat and feeling so calm, living life as one constant meditation. Andrea was definitely keen to speak with me again, as she offered another coaching session for free. However, that second conversation appeared to initiate a spiritual download about Atlantis. This was followed by memories coming back of being at a pyramid complex during that era. I also sensed we'd been looking in the wrong direction for the epicenter of Atlantis. I now think it was centered on what is known today as the United States.
The supreme ruler of Atlantis was likely the same character as Quetzalcoatl of the Aztec religion, and the initiatory rites connected with him are said to have led disciples to experience visions of a giant snake. This being was taught to be a direct link between the spirit realm of the gods and the physical world. And of course, some elementals on the astral plane are predominantly composed of the element of fire. And this ties in with what George was saying in the previous video about the coccyx appearing burnt following the snake dream, which began his Kundalini awakening. So it may be that people who have had previous lives in Atlantis are now experiencing a kind of replay of that initiation. It is likely that the people of Atlantis created these astral creatures through magic, as they believed such elementals could bring them power. But this ultimately helped to escalate an energetic shift into denser energies on the planet. The men of Atlantis then headed eastwards from America to conquer other lands, and their primary target was to overthrow the group who had commanded the Giza Plateau in Egypt. But disaster ultimately struck from above when something hit the earth. The writer Graham Hancock has talked about this, that there's geological evidence of a major impact taking place about 12,800 years ago. He also says that the center of this impact was the United States. And we are now finally healing from these events which took place all of those years ago.
At the end of my second one-on-one, I told Andrea what I thought of her in no uncertain terms. The following Monday, I was listening to a group call that was attended by both Andrea and her boss, who I will refer to as Tom. He asked her near the start if she'd had a good weekend. She said,
"Yes, and I've been very zen."
He then followed up by saying,
"Perhaps the mind is realizing it's not limited."
This immediately led to a sharp intake of breath from Andrea, but ultimately a pregnant pause with no direct answer. I intuitively knew that the two of them had been discussing me in private, and that she'd mentioned my declaration of feelings towards her. This intuition proved to be correct. In our next one-on-one, Andrea told me that a boss sensed I'd come to their course for a unique reason, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what that was. As time passed, I realised on the course that the term twin flames was being used incorrectly. Basically, to describe any situation where another person is the initial trigger of a spiritual awakening. However, it's really common for people to come across multiple catalysts and the twin flame appears at a later date. It's also concerning because oftentimes people can awaken following a destructive karmic relationship. The course also taught mindfulness, and there's surely no better tool in the realm of well-being than mindfulness. However, it was being referred to as a twin flame teaching. That doesn't make sense because mindfulness is connected to singularity, and every sentient being is ultimately one at the level of singularity. But this does dovetail with comments made that twin flames cannot be classed as a connection. By conflating twin flames with singularity and reducing related soul level phenomena, the term appeared to have been co-opted for a mass audience. So it could apply to anybody initiated into an awakening following a relationship breakup. Potentially, any type of connection can catalyze an awakening and have profound phenomena associated with it. Ultimately, I felt twin flames was being confused with the concept of the singular flame of awakening within self.
George mentioned that he started researching twin flames in 2010, and back then, information was far more limited on the subject. So there was probably only a handful of YouTube videos out there about twin flames. However, the term did at that point generally refer to two energies hatched from a kind of cosmic egg, sometimes referred to as a monad. And if we look at the biological world in terms of cell division, the idea that a comparable process takes place on a soul level is not only logical, but also in harmony with the most famous concept of Hermetic philosophy, which is as above, so below. And the concept of twin flames, even if not the term, is nothing new. For instance, in Manly P. Hall's book, Lectures on Ancient Philosophy, he referred to the common theory of a divided spirit, with the resultant quest of the severed parts for each other. It's worth mentioning that in some older texts, the words soul and spirit were used interchangeably, and so, in this case, Manly Hall appears to be referring to what we call the soul. However, it doesn't deter from the point that he's clearly not just describing the process of an internal alchemical marriage.
It was said on the course that if the masculine does return, their role is merely as a tool to balance off, in effect, dehumanizing them. I was also hearing on multiple occasions that twin flames are not meant to be together. However, I heard no logical reason why. In my opinion, anything is possible if we're doing the inner work, facing things as they come up in our outer reality, and are oriented towards right action. There were also statements which appeared to encourage turning one's back on experiences in the 3D. For instance, it was recommended to not try and understand your journey on the level of the mind. I was personally told that the profound events in my life were merely to lead me back to self. This is imbalanced and entirely at odds with the concept,
as above, so below.
we were surely not invested by God with a physical form in order to simply ignore what is happening in the physical. And to assess a divinely orchestrated phenomenon as little more than an elaborate test of our ability to ignore it seems misguided.
It's good that people are being directed to mindfulness in general, but I ask the question, at what cost? Because it does depend on how we're using mindfulness. If we were to take the path of ignoring divine guidance, we would surely drift further away from realizing our highest timeline here on Earth. And as we're living in an interactive universe, it will respond accordingly. It's a well-known scenario that the more someone pursues outgrown patterns in life, the more intensely the universe sends them challenging reminders of this.
The idea of not facing things as a rule is the opposite of how twin flames naturally function, or in fact, any kind of conscious relationship between two people on a spiritual journey. It is ultimately what is known as the false light, an approach that compromises self-responsibility and balanced right action in the 3D realm. And in respect to this, it's worth bearing in mind that some of the darker powers on this planet have also used mindfulness, in part, as a tool to reduce empathy for others. However, I'm certainly not diminishing the importance of mindfulness, because it's a brilliant tool, if used in the right way. However, mindfulness meditation alone means relatively little in the process of ascension, unless we're taking steps to live in such a way that is true to ourselves and who we're becoming rather than who we once were. This is about becoming self-responsible, being oriented towards right action, and overcoming the tendency for personal desires to impede our allegiance to the cause of truth. And this is not just about being true to ourselves, but also truthful for the benefit of others. And this may be particularly emphasized if we're in a teaching role. And it's important to recognize that there is an immutable natural law of compensation in the universe, which many call karma. So, an important aspect of the ascension process is about the nature of our service to others. And it makes sense in natural law that by helping others and being truthful, we also help ourselves in the process. We can picture a false light in balance using the yin-yang symbol. So, in effect, we would be aiming our energies upwards towards the light of heaven through the practice of mindfulness, but at the same time, failing to draw divine energy downwards so that it can be then grounded into the earth. So, when mindfulness is working well, we're facing situations as they arise and allowing them to pass through us. And through the discipline of practice, the theory is that we're increasingly not holding on to things through the repetitive mind patterns like we used to. However, the twin flame journey is a powerful experience, and if we're genuinely on this path, we will not forget our twin. And trying to do so will in the long run only be a recipe for greater imbalance. So the answer is more about an evolution taking place in the nature of our thoughts about them. One final point is that there is also some confusion out there about the nature of the aspects of the masculine and feminine within twin flames. As such, some teachers suggest each twin only possesses either masculine or feminine energy. However, if we look at the qualities associated with either masculine or feminine energy, it's clear that it would be impossible for that to be the case. So, with twin flames, each twin possesses both energies. And this is about achieving a greater harmony in that balance within each individual twin and then also between the twins.
So that concludes this episode of the Hero's Journey series. We'll be back soon with another episode. In that one, we'll be going deep into the concepts behind the hero's journey. In the meantime, if you would like to book a session with me or purchase any of my courses, those are available on my website. All of the links for that will be in the description box below. I am sending you so much love. I thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you later. Bye.